Do you find it boring to pursue different aspects of the Christian faith? Is it possible that you have caused that to take place or made it harder or more boring? We're going to talk about that in this video. Now, this is a part of a larger series called The Disciple. So if you are on our YouTube channel, Bethel Pittsburgh, go under playlist and you'll find a playlist titled The Disciple. And in there, that is placed in category order. So you will find categories like hermeneutics, apologetics, theology, development in our faith, things like that will be in there. So you just look for the category you want to look at. This category is on obstacles to the Christian, or challenges to the Christian faith, just things that seem to get in the way of our development in our faith. And one of those items that gets in the way is boredom. When we get bored with studying the Bible, praying, going to church, ministry, those kind of things, when we get bored with it, we end up lacking the motivation to do those things, and it causes this struggle to do those things. And those things are necessary ingredients for the strength. That they're like, we're the plants, and that's the sunlight and the soil and the water and all of those nutrients. And if we don't have it, our faith doesn't grow. In fact, it's at risk of dying. So we need those nutrients in our spirit to move forward in our faith. And when they become boring, we have a hard time motivating ourselves to do them. So how can I resolve that? Well, first I want to consider what might be. Now this is largely practical, although I will throw in there the statement from Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." That is to eliminate stimulation for a time so that I can actually engage God. There's also the statements that Jesus made that if your eye or your hand causes you to stumble or to sin, then remove it. The idea is to remove anything that's creating an obstacle to me moving forward in my faith. And so if boredom is becoming that for me, then I have a responsibility to get that out of the way and to be still before God. And my own personal theory is that I think all the technology stimulation that we have available to us has made it to where we're so stimulated that there's certain things that cannot stimulate us anymore. So let's think about the things that stimulate us and the history of it, because sometimes I think we think it's just because of the internet and social media and the cell phone, the smartphone. And I think that that's a part of the picture, but I just think that's the latter stages of it. I think that those things have upped the ante as far as how overly stimulated we are and how short of an attention span we have. But it's been going on for a long time. The internet on computers was available prior to smartphones and prior to social media even. And then television has been along for decades, and so that's been available to us. Again, we're not inundated by it as much as the smartphone accessible to us all the time. But that was there, and that created an impact on our ability to pay attention and be able to not get bored when we're not stimulated enough. Radio even factored into that. So there are different ways that we've stimulated ourselves, and if we get to the point of being overstimulated, then things that don't produce that level of stimulation, it's hard for us to engage in. And the Bible, and people have tried with apps and virtual ways to make use of Scripture, and those are good to do, but in many ways they're still limited, trying to do something to help us in prayer. But by and large, studying Bible, being involved in church and Christian fellowship, praying, seeking the Lord, worshiping the Lord, all of those things are low stimulation in comparison. Now, I'm not saying that God's not stimulating, but sometimes we have to get over the hurdle to connect with Him before that happens. And again, that be still idea sits there in Psalms. So when we're overly stimulated, and those items are low stimulation in comparison to our smartphones and social media and internet and TV, then we're going to have to moderate that, try to follow me on this, to try to lessen how much we need stimulation. And also how deep we're able to think about things. Because think about now the way our movies are. If you ever watch like a movie from the 90s, for example, you're like 30, sometimes even 45 minutes into a movie before everything starts moving real fast. Where today, it has to start off almost immediately fast moving. And there's a lesser degree of plot and character development because of that. I'm not saying it's not there, but not as much energy is given to that as is keeping us stimulated. And so our ability to think deeply is being hindered by this overstimulation. Now, I'm not being anti these things. You could throw in video games in there as well. I'm not being anti these things. It's just I have to acknowledge that the way I engage in it is having a negative impact potentially on the way I pursue the Lord. And so what's the solution to that? Well, I don't think these things are going away. I don't think that it's reasonable to say I just need to cut it all out of my life. Although I think doing that for various seasons and some kind of rotation is probably helpful. But these things are probably not going to be completely eliminated from our lives. So how do we get to a place where we lessen our need for stimulation? And I think that's by using these things in moderation. So making sure that I have time away from technology. I have time to just, and when I'm away from it, I'm spending some time being still. I'm spending some time reflecting. I'm spending some time in deep thought and separating myself from it. And the more I can get some moderation going, and the degree that this is necessary is really just depending on, like I need to assess, am I having a hard time spending time in prayer and studying the Word and Christian fellowship? Am I having a hard time thinking deeply? And if I am, then I probably need to start lessening that even more. If I have to lessen it even for a season down to no stimulation, then that's something I might have to do. It might even be like a drug, like a detox type scenario. But these are things that I need to work on in order to get to a place to do that. So I just encourage you to consider if your use of technology isn't possibly the reason why you are bored when listening to a sermon, bored in a worship service, bored in ministry, bored when studying the Bible, and bored while praying. And if so, I would encourage you to think about how to start moderating your use of technology to lessen your need for stimulation. It's not that those things aren't exciting, prayer, Bible study, listening to sermons, worship, and all of those things, ministry. It's just our ability to sense it is very, very dulled when we are so overly stimulated. So consider it. And if you have any thoughts on that or questions, leave them in the comments below. If you would like to grow in your faith in person and you live in the Pittsburgh area, we would love for you to join us at